Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto this week, the Prohibitionist group SAM releases results from a fabricated poll fixed to support their anti-rescheduling movement and agenda. Advocates from NORML, Marijuana Policy Project, and the American Trade Association of Cannabis and Hemp Industries blast the tactic as misinformation. Plus, Michigan House increases its taxes on cannabis wholesale sales by 24%, threatening one of the largest markets in the U.S. Amie Carter has that story. And 3 cannabis companies in Colorado get shut down by the state after ignoring health risks in their products over the past 5 years. Jenny Germano has the story on that state's new tough tactics. Plus, another threat to the hemp industry emerges in Texas, even though new regulations are in place as a new Senate villain emerges. And the latest in the soap opera that is the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission, newly returned Commissioner Shannon O'Brien puts the brakes on the social consumption license progress, reestablishing the chaos and delays under her leadership from 2 years ago. All that and more on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cannabis Coast to Coast News, WPCM TV's weekly show documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition in this country and around the world. I'm Alaina Pinto. So, did you hear that the co-founder of WPCM TV and the executive producer of this show, Jimmy Young, was nominated for an MJ Award for Cannabis Journalist of the Year? Those awards are part of the annual MJ BizCon trade show and celebration in Las Vegas in December. Now, Jimmy doesn't consider himself a journalist anymore, but he does curate the work of the journalists who work in the cannabis media industry every week, and he trains all of our correspondents and volunteer reporters. So if you want to vote for Jimmy or salute his efforts to bringing you the weekly news of the fight to end cannabis prohibition, you can scan the QR code on the screen once a day up until December 4th, the night of the award show at MJ BizCon this year. Okay, our first story focuses on the movement by prohibitionists who want to stop the rescheduling efforts that President Trump and the Republican-controlled Congress are still considering. One of the most active and visible groups who are backed by the substance abuse lobby and Big Pharma is SAM, Dr. Kevin Sabet's Smart Approaches to Marijuana Lobby. This week, they hired a pollster group called On Message to take a poll of 1,000 adults who were asked a question about rescheduling that many are calling biased. The group On Message is not even listed on the top 88 polling groups by Media Bias, an independent fact-checking group that oversees legitimate and regular pollsters in this country. The question asked a hypothetical question that said, if you knew the following were true about rescheduling marijuana from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 federal classification, which would reduce some federal restrictions on marijuana, would you be more or less likely to support rescheduling marijuana to a lower classification? Rescheduling marijuana would give marijuana companies a financial incentive to advertise more to children. Well, 65% of the adults polled said yes, of course, it would alter their opinions. But needless to say, many cannabis advocacy groups are furious by these nefarious tactics to influence lawmakers and public opinion. Adam Smith, the executive director of the Marijuana Policy Project, told Tom Angel's Marijuana Moment that SAM is spewing misinformation to confuse lawmakers and the public. Here are the facts. It is already a crime for cannabis businesses to advertise to children, one that can result in serious penalties. Moving cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, or even removing it from the schedule entirely, would not change that. Don't be fooled by prohibitionists' fear tactics. Project SAM's goal is not to protect kids. It is to drag us back to the dark days of hundreds of thousands of annual arrests, ruining the lives of otherwise law-abiding people, and packing prisons with people whose only crime is possession of a plant that humans have been using safely for thousands of years, end quote. Morgan Fox, the political director of NORML, also told that news organization Prohibitionists have long relied on creative interpretations of data to cast doubt on public support for cannabis policy reform. It is not surprising that they double down on this strategy when they are the ones writing the questions, he said. A month ago, executive producer Jimmy Young talked to Paul Armentano, the deputy director of NORML, who clarified what a move from Schedule 1 to 3 would actually do for the industry.
And then if you're in the industry and you're running a company that has minimal margins, which because of all the compliance and the regulations that everybody in this industry that is a plant touching part of the industry has to deal with, at least you could get rid of that vile 280E clause in your taxes and actually write off those basic business expenses that every other business in America has the right to do as a business, but they've withheld it from the cannabis community for a number of reasons. And in other words, that would be a great win for the industry because of how tight everybody is right now.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is we see some political opponents of rescheduling acting as if this would hand some sort of gift to the cannabis industry, when, as you just explained, this isn't a gift at all. Right now, the industry is facing a tax burden that no other industry faces, and that makes it very hard for them to do business. Rescheduling with regard to taxation on the industry simply levels the playing field. It doesn't give them some sort of new advantage, but it does take away an existing disadvantage that the industry has faced.
Michael Bronstein is the president of the American Trade Association of Cannabis and Hemp Industries, and he shared this quote. The questions in this poll are clearly misleading. Independent polling consistently shows that Americans of all political stripes support cannabis reform, including rescheduling, unquote. He also pointed out that in a recent poll by Emerson College, a group that is listed with very high marks from that independent list called Media Bias Fact Check of legitimate polling groups, shows that 2 in 3 American voters said legalizing marijuana nationwide would be, quote, good. It would be a good idea, according to the recent poll from Emerson College. Okay. Rescheduling does not legalize cannabis. It just allows the industry to have the same business deductions that every other industry in the United States enjoys to stay in business, something Sam obviously does not want at all. To be fair, SAM founder and president Dr. Kevin Sabet released this statement, quote, "This is not a partisan issue. Everyone who cares about the safety of their community and making sure foreign drug dealers don't benefit from strategic policy errors speaking up and letting their voices be heard. We hope that the president, as he faces a pivotal choice on marijuana, listens to the voters and not a big money influence campaign." End quote. While prohibitionists continue their efforts to stop the rescheduling effort, some states are also using cannabis taxes to offset budget shortfalls. Case in point is Michigan, where this week the Republican-controlled House in that state passed a significant tax increase on wholesale sales. Keep in mind that state is coming off a year where they produced record tax revenue of $331 million. Still, that was not enough to satisfy lawmakers. Amie Carter has more in her Michigan report, now sponsored by Wally's Wonder World and their custom handmade humidors.
This is mold on wheat. This is mold on weed. And this is what this Wonderworld plant is supposed to look like. Do you want to make sure this never happens to your precious flower? Check out the handmade humidors by Fenton, Michigan craftsman Gregory Johnson. Each humidor can hold 1 ounce of your stash, and it comes with a Boveda humidity pack. You care about your flower, so protect it inside a humidor made with American-grown maple, cherry, or sapele wood. Check out their website at wallyswonderworld.com. There you'll find the famous award-winning Hakuna Matata No Worries Humidor. You'll also find a variety of humidors with different designs. They even customize accessories like doobie tubes, grinders, and even a classic roach clip from the 70s. Treat your stash with class with a custom-made, handmade humidor from wallyswonderworld.com, and never worry about moldy weed again.
I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters with this week's Michigan Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm sorry, fam, but this week's buzz is all about politics. The Michigan legislature is lighting up some big issues that are going to be hitting your wallet. Our state leaders, led by Governor Whitmer, want to fix the damn roads, and their chosen funding source is you. The Michigan House just passed House Bill 4951, a bipartisan bill to pay for infrastructure with a massive new cannabis tax. The deal imposes 24% wholesale tax, which is in addition to the 16% retail tax, bringing the total tax burden on legal cannabis to a staggering 40%. This new wholesale tax even applies to medical cannabis. Lansing's number crunchers project it will raise $420 million annually for our roads. But the industry is warning this tax is a business killer. It will torpedo our successful low-price market, which is the biggest in the United States. It will drive consumers right back to the black market. This means lost jobs and reduced access for patients. If you live in Michigan, let your state senators know that making cannabis 40% while beer and wine are at a fraction of that is completely unacceptable. Urge a no vote on House Bill 4951. Michigan lawmakers are exploring legislation to put low-potency hemp-infused THC beverages into grocery stores, liquor shops, and bars. Currently, these drinks are only available at licensed dispensaries. This new plan, led by State Rep. Joe Argana, would route these hemp-derived seltzers through the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, dramatically expanding where you can grab a relaxing drink. This move is expected to generate significant new state tax revenue from a market that has exploded since 2018 Farm Bill. Finally, Rep. Joe Argana has introduced a package of bills to clean up two major industry issues. First up is payment reform under House Bill 4963. This bill mandates that all licensed marijuana retailers must pay for a product at the time of transfer to address the rampant problem of growers and processors not getting paid by the retail shops. So basically, there's no more fronts for businesses if this passes. Second is a push to regulate intoxicating hemp under House Bill 4964. This bill aims to stop the sale of unregulated, chemically converted hemp products. It would require these products to only be made by state licensed processors, with violations carrying misdemeanor penalties. Michigan sells more cannabis than any other state, and that's because its prices are low. Many people travel here from other states to buy, and the illicit market has been down. Hiking taxes to 40% will dramatically reduce these sales. People will suffer due to rationing medical cannabis, and small businesses will close, with Michiganders losing good jobs, all without generating the projected revenue. So it is all hands on deck, and now is the time to reach out to your state senator and oppose any new tax increase on cannabis. You can also attend the protest on Tuesday, September 30th in Lansing from 9 to 5. I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters.
The Michigan Report is sponsored by Wally'sWonderworld.com.
One more note on Michigan. That state is expected to vote on that tax increase that passed in the House sometime on Monday of this week. There's a major protest scheduled for Tuesday in Michigan as that legal adult use state continues to battle for a more reasonable and fair tax rate. Well, one of the oldest and most established cannabis markets operates in Colorado. That state has seen prices fall tremendously, and now regulators there are stepping up their efforts to curb bad actors who have been taking advantage of loose regulations that the state is now cleaning up. Case in point is that this week, 3 companies were given cease and desist orders. They were warned 5 years ago that the products they were producing were causing health issues, which included liver damage. The companies are Nuke Enterprises, SEMA Sciences, and Nuka Properties. All have been ordered to shut down their operations, and led by their co-founder Peter Barsoom, paid a $400,000 fine. They will be allowed to reopen if certain conditions are met, or they will be hit with another $600,000 fine. That state is starting to enforce more strict random testing controls, and Jenny Germano explains in her Colorado report.
I am Jenny Germano with ICS Consulting. This is the Colorado report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Colorado cannabis regulators are stepping up oversight. The Department of Public Health and Environment, together with the Marijuana Enforcement Division, announced on September 19th they'll soon begin to collect products directly from dispensary shelves across the state over the next few weeks. This one-time spot check aims to verify that cannabis products are both safe and accurately labeled. Officials say they will be testing for potential contaminants things like pesticides, mold, or other harmful substances, as well as confirming that THC potency matches what is on the printed packaging and labels. The move comes after recent studies have raised red flags. Independent testing found that some cannabis products on the market contain misleading THC levels or failed safety standards. In some cases, products showed more or less potency than advertised, an issue that can be especially concerning for medical patients who rely on accurate dosing. By running these statewide spot checks, regulators say they're looking to protect public health, restore consumer confidence, and ensure the cannabis industry is held accountable to the standards already in place. Following the completion of the initial program, the CDPHE team will collect, organize, and analyze the data. The goal is for the CDPHE to publish an initial summary of data approximately 30 days after the program completion, and more detailed report approximately 90 days after the program completion. The regulators have not yet disclosed if this will become a recurring program. For now, consumers are encouraged to purchase from licensed dispensaries and to look for official lab results when choosing products at their favorite dispensary. I am Jenny Germano with ICS Consulting, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Two stories out of New York this week. The state Supreme Court there is backing the existing dispensaries who were technically out of compliance when they were granted commence operation orders by the Office of Cannabis Management. 152 dispensaries had been allowed to operate in areas that, in retrospect, were deemed too close to schools. Albany Supreme Court Judge Kerry Hinkle delivered the preliminary injunction protecting the operations from any action that would have forced them to shut down already existing stores. Now, the state has until February of 2026 to enact permanent legislation allowing the stores to stay open. Staying open is all one dispensary in Southampton wants to be able to do. The store called Charlie Fox, yes, that's the name, was shut down by local town officials 1 week after it had opened, with Southampton town leaders claiming that even though Charlie Fox has a state legal permit to commence operations, the town still has final say over its operations. Once again, this will be settled in the courts. In Massachusetts, the court system has been busy trying to rectify the battle between the state and Commissioner Shannon O'Brien, who was reinstated for her improper dismissal following a series of accusations by disgruntled former employees of the Cannabis Control Commission. Now, O'Brien is back in charge, and she immediately put the kibosh on any progress made towards the awarding of social consumption licenses. With more from Massachusetts, here's Curtis Emery.
I'm Curtis Emery, a bud tender from Resonate in Worcester, Massachusetts, with the Bay State Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. More on a continuing story here out of Massachusetts, the CCC announces yet another pause in their release of official guidelines on social consumption lounges here in Massachusetts. Yes, with the turn of O'Brien to the CCC, the regulatory body has announced a delay in releasing this framework. Hopefully, more work will be done this month, but the pause is there primarily to get O'Brien caught up on where the CCC is heading and allowing the CCC to move forward in a unified manner. Also, news here out of Massachusetts. Last week, the House Ways and Means Committee voted on new changes to the medical delivery framework here in the state. Two clauses were removed from the original guidance and replaced with 3 new clauses. These 3 new clauses hope to open up business and make it easier for dispensaries and cultivators to offer medical delivery in the state. Of those 3 clauses, the biggest one would be a change in the cultivation methods used by cultivators who produce product for medical delivery. In the past, the law stipulated that only organic methods of cultivation would be allowed for medical delivery. However, going forward with these new guidelines, inorganic methods of cultivation are now open for legal medical delivery. Hopefully, this will make it so that patients who need cannabis delivered will be able to get what they need and allow for businesses to thrive within the state, offering different services for their customer base. I have been Curtis Emery with the Bay State Report, Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
That will do it for the A block of this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. In the B block, we have more state reports and our international news segment from Europe and Canada. Plus, Kerry Hinkle's Hemp report explains why some things just take forever in our federal government that is close to shutting down this week. Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues after this break.
Your cannabis business could be overpaying by hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal income taxes because of one simple assumption that you're making about your accountant. A dispensary owner in Colorado called me frustrated as hell. He'd been working with the same accountant for 3 years. His accountant said, "What's 471C?" Here's what the ignorance of that accountant was costing this business owner: $180,000 every single year for 3 years. 471C has been around since 2017. We're talking about an 8-year-old tax provision that many cannabis CPAs don't fully understand. 471C is one of the most complex and highly debated tax strategies in the cannabis industry. If you want to make sure you're not leaving any money on the table, I'm offering free 471C reviews this month. Link in the description.
Accounting Buds has grown into Buds Group, the same award-winning quality, now with more service offerings. Buds Group, your best buds in the biz.
Looking for PR that over-delivers on expectations? At Maverick Public Relations, they pair big agency experience with personalized attention. From launching award-winning brands to securing top-tier media hits, their data-driven communications team helps visionary leaders and entrepreneurs rise above the media noise. Maverick PR is responsive, collaborative, and relentless about results and ROI. Visit themaverickpr.com and make headlines together.
If you want to make history, if you want to be part of history, if you want to say you helped legalize marijuana in America, now is the time to join us.
Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This is the B block or second section of our news program. I'm Alaina Pinto. It's now time to take a look at the international scene. The European Union is expected to take up the debate about the legal limit of THC in industrial hemp products. Sound familiar? Of course, it's the same misguided debate about the intoxicating cannabinoid in the cannabis sativa plant that continues to drive the hemp market. Hemp farmers in Europe want more than the 0.3% limit on THC, not because they want to grow crops that are intoxicating, but the challenge is in growing crops that are below that legal limit in dry weight. Farmers have been lobbying for an increase of up to 1%, but most European lawmakers are resisting that limit remain where it is. Only one country in Europe has increased that, and that one is Switzerland. That country has already implemented the 1% limit. And with more from Europe, we start in the UK with Dave Barton.
I'm Dave Barton from Thermador with your UK Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. A man convicted of supplying black market cannabis to patients in need has had his original sentence overturned and will now face up to 4 years in prison. 40-year-old Joel Cunningham from Leeds, Yorkshire, was originally handed an 18-month suspended sentence back in June this year. But this was increased to 4 years after the case was brought to the Court of Appeal by a solicitor arguing against the sentence's leniency. Despite the fact the original judge ruling deemed Mr. Cunningham was aiming to help people rather than make a profit. While originally convicted on 7 charges, including the intent to supply magic mushrooms, at the Court of Appeal, the Solicitor General argued that the magic mushrooms conviction should have been treated as the lead offence. Since the trial, more than 4,000 people have signed a petition claiming Cunningham had helped them manage a range of conditions, including chronic pain and severe epilepsy. That's all for this week's UK report. I'm Dave Barton from Thermidor, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
This is Debi Facey with the Canadian Coast to Coast Cannabis News Report. So in Canada this week, what we've had is we found in mid-2025, the number of pre-rolls actually being sold had reached a big, huge high of $1.27 billion in revenue, which captured 32.8% of the market overall, which is really great because that means that people are finding that pre-rolls are not only efficient, but it is something that is an easy go-to for them. But also it shows that our legal market is still creating a developing product that we all enjoy. Next we have is Health Canada has updated their credentials when it comes to the LPs and what is expected of them. So now what they have done is they have exempted the need of demonstrating their not only their micro grows, but their plant trimmings and their seed reporting. So those units are no longer something that is needed when it comes to Health Canada and their QA and LP checks. So that is something that is going to be great when it comes to LPs and not having too much on their plate. And hopefully they're able to accomplish 100% in everything else. This is Debi Facey with your Canadian Coast to Coast Cannabis News Report. Case.
Europe isn't the only continent where the debate over a quantifiable amount of THC in hemp is continuing. Here in the US, the effects of the 2018 Farm Bill continue to drive debate over the legal limit of 0.3%. That has been exploited to drive the underregulated billion-dollar hemp market. Kerry Hinkle is our hemp reporter, and he explains how the political process works in this country and the subsequent trickle-down effect all over the world.
Hi, everyone. This is Kerry Hinkle with Bayou City Hemp out of Houston, Texas, and I am back again with another hemp report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This week, the hemp industry turns their attention back to the federal level as we navigate a complicated and convoluted process where a potential hemp ban continues to play out. You may remember that Congressman Andy Harris from Maryland has inserted language in the House Agriculture Appropriations Bill that would redefine hemp to state that it cannot have any quantifiable amounts of THC. And while we understand that these House Agriculture Appropriations bills rarely pass on their own, what we're navigating now is what is called a minibus package. And this is where the federal government will take a few must-have spending bills like the Ag-Appropes bill, throw them together in one package. They typically strip out any controversial or partisan language and pass them through both chambers and send them to the president's desk in an effort to just keep the government open and operating. And this process, where you have these thousands-page bills, is exactly where savvy political operators like Senator Mitch McConnell and Andy Harris can insert language in these backroom dealings to have leverage over one another to accomplish their own personal goals. And Andy Harris's goal is to ban the hemp industry. And so that's why over the last few weeks, the industry has been working with Congressman Jamie Comer from Kentucky as a Republican lead and his counterpart in the state as Morgan McGarvey on the Dem lead to get 27 total House signatures on this letter that states that they will not vote for the Agriculture Appropriations Bill unless the hemp ban language is removed. And what's really important is that those 27 members, it's split almost right down the middle between Republicans and Democrats. So this means with the razor-thin margin lead that the Republicans have on the House side, having a few of their R's flipped to this side means that they're going to have a hard time passing this bill unless they strip this hemp ban language. And so while political operators are very savvy in wanting to get this into a conference committee where they will be able to have more leverage to accomplish what Andy Harris wants, we as an industry have been able to rally several members that are not on this conference to say, you're not going to be able to pass the bill at all unless you strip this language. And so today, September 26th, the letter officially went out. we are now looking for either maybe Jamie Comer himself or Thomas Massie, also from a Republican from Kentucky, or another member that has signed on to the letter to force a full House floor vote to eventually strip that language before it heads to conference. Again, we think that with the bipartisan support on the letter and the sheer support of 27 signed on, that we'll be able to do this. But if not, then we head to the conference committee where we will need to work the conferees to hopefully strip out that language. So it's a really complicated process, and they do this on purpose to confuse the public and to eventually get their intended goals. And yet we as an industry work extremely hard to push back on that. So we'll continue to monitor and report as things develop in DC. But again, I am Kerry Hinkle with Bayou City Hemp, and this was another hemp report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'll see you next week.
If that isn't confusing enough for you, who can understand the alphabet soup of cannabinoids that are produced by the cannabis sativa plant? It all starts with Delta-8 hemp products or the naturally produced Delta-9 THC products. Go into any licensed cannabis shop in the US and check out the cannabinoid profiles of the plant medicine, and you are bound to find THCA in many products. And now that scientists and growers have figured ways to grow legal hemp that gets you high, you have a billion-dollar industry that is underregulated and booming. On the legal over-regulated side, you have medical patients who need to know just how much Delta-9 THC is in each product. Yet THC percentage is not necessarily indicative of how potent the product is. Yet the majority of regular consumers continue to buy their products based on that THC percentage. And that's why some testing labs are prone to enhance their results in order to stay in business. This is the challenge that has evolved because, once again, the government really had no idea what they were doing when they passed the 2018 Farm Bill. Now, even the licensed cannabis industry in adult use states are confused. To make things even more challenging, you still have prohibitionists who want to ban all THC products and go back to the dark ages that will force all users back to the legacy market. Legal prices are falling because too many licenses were awarded based on the demand from the market. Look what's been going on in Texas, where there is a fledgling medical cannabis market and a booming THC-infused hemp market. The governor there, Greg Abbott, recently issued an executive order to regulate the THC-infused hemp market, despite his lieutenant governor's, Dan Patrick's, efforts to ban everything. And now a new member of the Texas Senate has emerged who is joining the cause of that lieutenant governor. That senator's name is Charles Perry, and he is now trying to introduce a total hemp ban again. But get this, that legislature only meets in odd number years. So nothing will change in Texas until at least in 2027. Did you follow all that? I know it's mind-boggling, but that is the state of the industry right now. Well, in Virginia, at least there is some clarity in the upcoming governor's race where you have two different approaches to the adult use of cannabis. And Joe Parsons has our Virginia report, including a pitch for our executive producer, Jimmy Young, on his weekly radio show. Here's Joe.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WV and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Early voting for Virginia has begun for the governor's seat, and now is your time to get out there and make your voice heard. This year's election will be monumental, as not only will the first female governor be decided for Virginia, but the future of the cannabis industry will be on the line as well. Democratic candidate Abigail Spanberger has made her position loud and clear and has vowed to open a safe, fair, and most importantly, a regulated cannabis system, while decreasing the impact of the legacy market in the process. Her opponent, Republican Winston Earl Sears, has only come out to say that cannabis is a gateway drug and would destroy the Commonwealth. So clearly, the entire fate of the adult use cannabis market that's been the will of the people since 2021 is going to be on the line for this election. This week on Coffee Talk, we discuss the rising trend of medical storefronts, not just in Virginia, but across the country, slowly replacing traditional Delta-9 flower with THCA flower and using THCA in vapes and concentrates. The trend has been spreading at an alarming rate and raises many questions about the future of traditional cannabis and why the actions of the hot hemp wars could forever affect the industry. Is this the end of traditional cannabis being sold across the nation? Only time will tell. But for now, it doesn't look good. And lastly, we also talked about the MJ Awards that are coming up. It's the cannabis industry's yearly gala honoring the finest in the industry for their hard work, devotion, and dedication to the plant medicine. This year, WPCM-TV's own founder and producer, Jimmy Young, was nominated for Cannabis Journalist of the Year. I bet you know who I voted for.
More than one person?
No.
Yeah, who gets to vote? Who really?
Everybody.
Oh, it's just...
Everybody.
Okay.
You just go online to www.emjay.
And how often can you vote?
Once a day.
Okay.
So you could alternate. You could vote for Jimmy one day and...
I don't think Jimmy would like that. No, but anyway.
No.
What, is he going to dock your paycheck?
yeah, right? But anyway.
But Jimmy's a good guy. So for those of you who are tuning in, we have had him on the show a couple times. So he's nice.
Yeah, so anyone within the sound of my voice, please cast your vote for Jimmy Young. It would really mean a lot to us. And Jimmy, if you are listening to this one, just know this, man, there's nobody else that I can think of that is more deserving. It's you have given people just like me that thought that we'd never have a voice to actually have that voice. And you've given us an awesome platform. So thank you so much to WPCM TV, Jimmy Young, everybody else listening. Get out there and vote. It'll be good times. Most definitely.
I'm gonna do a write-in ballot. I'm voting for Joe.
Well, thank you, y'all. Thank you. I don't know if it's gonna help.
My personal favorite cannabis reporter.
Well,
that was fun, and I meant every word. Well, that's going to do it for this week's Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WV in Charlottesville. And as always, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, stay lifted.
With many states still debating how to maximize sales taxes on cannabis to make up for budget shortfalls, the Golden State of California finally reversed their pending tax increase. Dina Nagib has that story as she reports from the Latinos and Cannabis Festival in LA this week.
I'm Dina Nagib with Grass Goddess Consulting, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Today I'm reporting live from the Latinas in Cannabis 3rd Annual Summit here in Los Angeles. They have lots of panels, booths. There's actually a grow workshop that's going on right now while I record this, and lots of people from the cannabis community coming together to lift up Latinas. It's Hispanic Heritage Month, and so really excited to be at this great event today, sharing it with y'all. And I also wanted to report on some of the latest California news. We actually have great news out of Sacramento. AB 564, which reduces the cannabis excise tax back down to 15%, was signed by Governor Newsom last Monday. So that change will go into effect on October 1st. And that's really providing relief to an industry that is struggling with overtaxation. In my opinion, it's the biggest news for California of the year, and I'm really excited to share it. I'm Dina Nagib with Grass Goddess Consulting, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Now let's check in with the publicly traded cannabis stocks, where everyone is holding their breath over when and if President Trump moves towards getting cannabis rescheduled, which will certainly impact what goes on Wall Street. Here's Doug Miller, who is high on Wall Street this week and every week.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Shares of Green Thumb Industries stock ticker GTBIF jumped nearly 9% this week after the company announced a $50 million share repurchase program. That's a bold move in cannabis where buybacks are rare due to limited access to capital and strict regulations. Management says the program's designed to return value to shareholders and signals confidence in the company's long-term future. This follows a 2023 buyback where Green Thumb repurchased 13.5 million shares worth $108 million, showing a clear track record of shareholder-friendly actions. While revenue grew about 5% year over year to $293 million last quarter, Pricing pressure and higher costs hit profitability hard, with margins sliding and net income dipping into the red. They also have 100% of sales tied into the U.S. market, so Green Thumb remains highly exposed to regulatory risks, especially with no federal legalization in sight. So let's see how the stock chart looks. It's trading around $8.22, and it's curling up and looks good and looks like it wants to continue its way up. Be sure to watch for dips, trade smart, and lock in those profits. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Doug Miller.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago clone guy, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, just outside of Chicago, Illinois. I'm happy to report that I am reporting from and from what I know, is the first of its kind clone manufacturing facility in Illinois. Behind me, this side, you're going to see my first row of lights. I have 12 lights, a whole row of them right there. Over here is where I'm going to be starting my genetics, but this room behind me is going to be where the mothers will be planted and taken care of, and then I'm also going to be keeping the clones in here. I am a licensed hemp farmer in the state of Illinois on 10 acres of land. I have indoor capability, and I have 8 acres of land outdoor capability to do, haven't decided yet, maybe some THCA. Maybe I'm going to run plants and do clones for outdoor grows in Michigan, but the possibilities are kind of all over the place right now. But I'm just happy to report I'm going to be doing all my reports from this location. There's a whole nother room. This whole place is a mess. It's echoey because there's nothing here, but I'm going to bring you along with me on this adventure. What I've been telling, what my people are saying, it's going to be an epic adventure. But this is some big news in Illinois because from what I know, this is the first of its kind. We're going to be focused on, commercial and craft grows, licensed facilities, selling to them. But in other news, I wanted to talk about Green Thumb Industries. I recently reported that Governor Pritzker was mad at the hemp industry, and it was triggered pretty much because of Green Thumb Industries. So this is what happened. Green Thumb was giving out free THCA hemp legal beverages on the lakefront, giving them out to people because they're legal. It's clear as day legal. Well, people didn't like it, and long story short, the city sent Green Thumb Industries, or I think it's called, their brand is called Senoritas, they sent them a cease and desist letter to stop doing that. Nothing's happened since then, but this has ramped up the attack on the hemp industry, which I am highly involved in. But that sums up some of the news going on right now in Illinois. Thanks for watching Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago Clone Guy.
That's going to wrap up our B block this week, but we have plenty more of Cannabis Coast to Coast news, including our reports from the Southwest, where valuations and prices are falling fast. Cannabis Coast to Coast news continues after this break.
What if we're right? What if all of a sudden they discovered that there is medical use for marijuana and that it is good for you and it's better than alcohol and it's better than opioids and it helps your health? What if we're right? What if they find that out?
Specific cannabinoids have medical value. These are facts.
I'm here today in hopes to assist in removing the demonized stigma of cannabis and the perception that cannabis is just about getting high. The true base of this plant has to be known.
I don't think anybody should ever go to jail for cannabis. Get some medicine, and everybody should have access to it.
This is something which, at the very, very least, is the key to alleviating suffering and extending life for millions of human beings. Right? For returning some kind of balance to our society, and quite possibly of restoring our planet's natural balance as well.
Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This is the C block or final section of our weekly show. I'm Alaina Pinto. It's getting to be crunch time for ballot signatures in the state of Oklahoma, where there is an initiative to get adult use legalization approved in time for the 2026 elections. Kimmy Cannabis has an update.
I am Kimmy Cannabis from Can I Talk About It with the Oklahoma Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. We only have until November 4th to collect signatures for adult use state question 837. Out in the community, I keep seeing two familiar faces, Andrea and Chris Guerrero, tirelessly donating their time to the cause. When I asked Chris how things are going, he told me if everyone with a petition gets just 9 signatures a day, we'll reach our goal and make history for a second time in Oklahoma. Have faith in what you are doing, because it might not matter to some, but it matters to us. Free the weed. Remember, you are the resistance. Get involved, register to vote, sign the petition, and keep your eyes on the prize. Keep pushing and refuse to lose. Andrea added that while many petitioners are knocking it out of the park, others aren't putting in the effort. She visited one dispensary that only had 4 signatures, and after leaving upset, she messaged the owner urging them to make sure employees at least mention State Question 837. Andrea also said that the real challenge is not opportunity, but manpower. There are events everywhere and people asking us to set up, but our calendar is already full. We simply need more volunteers to get out there. If you would like to volunteer, contact orca4ok.com. Switching gears to something lighter, usually companies ask customers what their favorite strain is, but Jason Adams of Pollination Cultivation recently flipped the script, asking, "What's your least favorite strain we grow?" He explained that after years of pheno hunting, sometimes you have to kiss a lot of frogs before finding a princess. Pollination wants honest feedback so they can keep bringing the very best to their patients. That's it for the Oklahoma Cannabis Report. I am Kimmy Cannabis from Can I Talk About It with Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Peace, love, and all that good stuff.
All over the cannabis industry, valuations of companies are falling like prices in various states. This is true for companies in already existing adult use states, and that includes Arizona, where Karen Black has the details.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Arizona's cannabis industry continues to attract premium investor interest despite recent market challenges. A new study reveals Arizona's cannabis businesses command the highest valuations in the nation, with analysts pointing to the state's limited licensing structure and mature regulatory framework as key differentiators. In other business news, Bianchi and Brandt, one of Arizona's top cannabis law firms, celebrated its 6th anniversary, a milestone that highlights the growing demand for sophisticated legal services in the state's cannabis sector. However, social justice issues remain. The Last Prisoner Project continues to advocate for Air Force veteran Robert Deals, who remains incarcerated on decades-old cannabis charges, while his daughter, Alicia, operates a cookies dispensary in Tempe. The case underscores the complex transition from prohibition to legalization, with Sarah Gersten from the Last Prisoner Project working with the Deals family on a clemency petition to Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs. Meanwhile, there's major legal news from the Navajo Nation, which spans Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. Our tribal correspondent, Tina Tasaka, will have the full story. On the events front, Arizona's cannabis community is showing resilience with several past and future gatherings. Earl Camp, Arizona's only cannabis camping festival, was scheduled to return to Camp Verde this September after being canceled last year, but there's no evidence the event actually took place. However, the Earl Cup returns to Mesa on October 18th. The Marijuana Industry Trade Association held its monthly networking event Wednesday night in Scottsdale, and next week, Tucson will host the state's first ever cannabis crawl. The High on 4th event launches October 4th along 4th Avenue in the Old Pueblo and will feature self-guided tours, product demonstrations, and exclusive deals. At $35 for general admission, it represents a creative approach to community engagement as the industry evolves beyond traditional retail models. That will do it for this week's Arizona Report. I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
With all the doom and gloom in many legal adult use states, Maryland passed some new laws that opens the door for home grow, plus some home manufacturing of products like tinctures and edibles. Here's Christopher Bright with those details.
I'm Christopher Bright from the Enlightened Voice. Welcome to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'll be bringing you the latest cannabis headlines from Maryland. Starting October 1st, Maryland's new cannabis law takes effect, allowing adults 21 and older to produce cannabis products at home for personal use, as long as no violent solvents like butane are involved. House Bill 413 and Senate Bill 925 also reduced penalties for certain cannabis-related offenses, treating them less harshly than before, while serious trafficking cases still face strong felony charges. Additionally, the law offers resentencing opportunities for those incarcerated under outdated cannabis or cocaine-based laws, potentially reducing sentences for many. This marks another step in Maryland's shift towards less punishing and more rehabilitative approach to cannabis reform, giving adults more autonomy and a chance at justice for past convictions. That's all for this week's of Maryland Cannabis Report. I'm Christopher Bright from the Enlightened Voice, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
One sign of maturity in the cannabis industry is when retailers start to use data analytics to study the fluctuations in the retail market. And now, thanks to the legendary personalities of Tommy Chong and Cheech Marin, any company that carries their products will get access to data provided by industry leader Headset. This information can help each store stock the proper amount of materials in order to speed up the retail process. And best of all, it's free for stores who carry Cheech and Chong's products. This is the time of year when growers are ready to harvest their outdoor grows before the snow flies. And that's true out in Washington State, where Matthew Friedlander reports from his farm in his backyard. Here's Matt.
Hey everybody, this is Matthew Friedlander with Scheduled Organics, coming to you from my hemp garden here in Washington State with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. So it is about to be harvest time here in the Northwest. And we are starting today on our CBD hemp garden. I've got about 1,800 square feet of plants in the ground. We are pulling them out. We're hoping to get about 150 pounds of extractable material out of this. So good news there. On the legislative front here in Washington, things are about to get real busy. Our session starts, I believe, in December, and is a short session this year, so it goes from December to February. The big thing that we're keeping an eye on here is the LCB restructuring bill, which we are trying to completely revamp the structure of the LCB board, move it to governor-appointed positions. And yeah, we're hoping that this will help fix some of the systemic issues that we've been dealing with here in Washington, and really just the slow pace of reform trying to deal with these issues, which has been hindered largely by the regulatory body that is responsible for creating rules of this industry. So, and that is the Washington Liquor and Cannabis Board. So that's the big topic of discussion this year. We're going to see some bills to restructure the taxes here in the state as well. See how that shapes up. There's a patient access bill, among other things that we're looking at and following as well. So that's what I've got for you out of Washington State. I am Matthew reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
And finally tonight, for those of you who don't subscribe to the Celeb Stoner newsletter produced by Steve Bloom, the New York-based writer always shares stories from his extensive archives of material from his days as High Times editor. But this week, he shares the story about the time when Willie Nelson got high with the late President Jimmy Carter's son, Chip. That alone is a pretty wild memory from the 1970s. But now add in the fact that this special sesh took place on the roof of the White House in Washington, D.C. The story was revisited in this week's Celeb Stoner newsletter and was originally shared with the world in Willie Nelson's autobiography published in 1988. So, what are the chances another son of a president might sneak up on the roof of the White House to get high? Probably slim and none, but that was the decade of the 1970s when it was part of the counterculture. We're shaking up the establishment by breaking rules and laws that young people just didn't believe in. Well, that's this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Consume responsibly, and we'll see you next week.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Pro Cannabis Media is now WPCM TV, your go-to website for things cannabis. WPCM TV is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news you need.
Amie Carter. This week, she reports from inside the State House in Lansing.
I'm Amie Carter from Michigan Weedsters with this week's Michigan report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
And talk shows about all things cannabis.
Well, thank you, and thank you for all you're doing to get the word out. Like, this show is so important.
It all started back in 2018 when Emmy award-winning talk show host Jimmy Young kicked it off with the In the Weeds podcast.
That it's not just any generic paper towel. You do have a brand that you use, right?
Yeah, we live or die by the bounty. I mean...
the quicker picker-upper! I love that!
His mission? Building an army of multimedia journalists and podcast hosts who are documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition in this country and around the world. Fast forward to today, and we've got the nation's only weekly cannabis coast-to-coast news program with Alaina Pinto.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News, WPCM TV's weekly production of the fight to end cannabis prohibition in this country and around the world. I'm Alaina Pinto.
Delivering the nation's only TV news-style program. Since June 2021, WPCM TV has racked up over 1.3 million views with 17 million impressions and picked up over 16,000 subscribers on YouTube alone. For more information, contact the team at WPCMTV.com